Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. This is a continuation in the series that we launched earlier this week on topics that either we're thinking about today or will be thinking about here shortly in the future. I've got Dan Cockerell on. Dan's been on the podcast before. We're really interested in hearing his thoughts on some of the things that are going on, specifically to the topic around leadership. Dan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I know everyone is stressed out and not quite sure what's going on. So I think it's great we get on and talk about this and share our thoughts and let people come to their own conclusions.
Awesome. So what is leadership, Dan?
Yeah, so I would say leadership, and I'm going to answer these questions through the context of what's going on right now. I think leadership is being visible. That's right now probably one of the most important things. I think that's why you're doing this podcast. I started doing a daily podcast on my show, talking to people. I think a lot of times leaders think, well, if I don't have any news to share, then I don't need to be communicating. But there's a huge empathetic piece here, and people want to hear what is going on. And even if you're not sure what's happening with the situation, leaders need to step out there and have some message. If there's no message, there's no leadership. And so you got to have a message. The message could be, we don't know how bad this is going to be, and here's 3 things you need to be doing right now and be thinking about. And here are my thoughts on that right now. Not having false confidence, not trying to mislead people. But I think leaders in times like this have to take it on their shoulders, not only to manage their own emotions, but really be out and be visible and be giving people their straight up opinion on what's going on and their thoughts. I don't even think telling people, everything's going to be okay, because you can't tell people that. Telling people not to worry. You can't tell people not to worry. But I think what you can do is share your thoughts and tell them how to best navigate. And then at the end of the day, anything else you can do is great. But that communication piece is a pretty big deal. And I'd say, as a leader, if you think you're doing a lot of it, do more, because you're not. As soon as you think you're doing enough, you're just getting started.
And so what are some common mistakes we make when thinking about leadership?
I think one is, as leaders, we think we're supposed to have all the answers, or we're supposed to pretend and act like we have all the answers. And leaders who really excel in situations like this really open up their ears, and they're open to all kinds of information, and they let all kinds of information in. Now, you have to be discerning, and you have to make sure that you're taking whatever information you're getting and you're rating it, and you're prioritizing it, and you're looking at the credibility of it. But leaders have their ears open, because there's going to be someone out there who doesn't have the title, doesn't have the rank in your company or in your whoever you're dealing with, who's going to have an idea. And so leaders, they're here to facilitate conversations, I would say, and not be seen as the experts. The world is way too complicated today for any given leader, to know everything that's happening. So, for example, right now, the CDC and the experts on this, they should be the people stepping up and talking, and they are, and talking about the facts and what they know. And the next crisis we have, whatever that's going to be, may not be around a pandemic. And let those people step up and speak on the topics at hand. But leaders are willing to kind of, like I said, open their ears and get rid of all their filters and all their preconditioned thoughts about how things are, and actually see through all that, see what's really going on.
So speaking of that, why do we make these mistakes?
I think ego is a big one. When you get a title and people, you just, in your head, you think, and you've always acted this way, that you're supposed to have all the answers. You're never supposed to be caught off guard. You're never supposed to be vulnerable. And I think our egos get in the way a lot of times of that. And I find that with myself sometimes. I'm not willing to listen to people, because I'm an expert in my industry and I do what I do. And I think that plays into it. I think at the end of the day, through all that, now you could say pressure and stress and other things play through, but a lot of leaders go through that. We all go through that. But I think a lot of times it comes down to ego, and people don't see their role as facilitators. They see their role as sort of, the Messiah, the person who's going to, have all the answers and make everything right. And that's just not the way it works. And great leaders are going to put people around them, so the team and the goal is reached regardless of what their contribution is.
I know you talked about great leaders putting people around them. What are some other ways that we can avoid falling into the ego mistake that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think once you put those people around you, you encourage them to speak up and you listen. You may, as a leader, you don't want to shut your mouth and not offer your opinion. But sometimes leaders that have a really strong following, once they put their opinion out there, no one else wants to say anything against that, and that's very dangerous. And that's where bad things happen. And so I think leaders have to encourage their people, saying, "Look, I'm going to use my expertise and I'm going to put my opinion out, but I need everyone to speak up exactly what they're thinking, and that's how we're going to come to better solutions." And when I was in my jobs, I'd had some of my general managers either in the group if they felt comfortable, or after meetings they'd come to me and say, "Dan, I didn't want to speak up the meeting, but I think maybe we're making a mistake the direction we're going." And they really straightened me out and had me go in a different direction. And I think just your mindset. Just think to yourself, your goal is not to look good, and your goal is not to be at the end of this be personally rated as a leader of how well you did. Your goal is to take whatever your organization is, whether it's your family, your business, your community, whatever you're helping. Your goal at the end of the day is to get those people through this, not to get you through this. And I think leaders realize that. They know that they define success not on their personal performance, but how the group arrives at their destination. And if you can get that in your head, then you'll think about this in a much different way, and you'll think about yourself much as a planner and a superintendent of all the activities, as opposed to the warrior that stands up on the hill and leads everybody. Because a lot of this is, like I said, it's complex, and you need everyone to be able to step in and contribute.
So, how does this change when thinking about leadership in the context of working from home or remote work?
Yeah. So communication, once again, that becomes even more important because you're not going to run into people. You can't call people into meetings. So those who are used to remote work have an advantage here because they have the technology. They understand how this process works, and they're able to get out of the gate quickly. I would say for those who are not used to this, they're not used to being at home. They're used to having a big team around physically around them and be able to pull people together, figure out the technology quickly, or find someone on your team who understands the technology and have them sign up for a Skype account or a Zoom account, or get on a group text messaging base. Whatever it is that's going to connect you and make sure you all are communicating constantly is the key. And I'm sure there's someone in your organization, or you can just Google it. How do what platforms can I use to make sure I'm communicating to people? Absent of all that, just get your recorder on your smartphone and record a message every day and just blast it out to your team and go, "Hey, here's 60 seconds of a stream of consciousness about what I'm thinking about and what I'm doing today and what we should be focused on," and go from there. So the big one for me, once again, use the technology that you have available, use the telephone, use the things you have to reach out to people and touch them personally so that you can keep everybody on course.
And how does this change when thinking about leadership in the context of, and there's going to be three of these, but how does it change in the context of teams? So leading those inside the organization, customers, leading those outside of the organization, and self.
Yeah, well, I like to always start with self, right? So I'll go backwards because that's the most important thing. I think come up with a routine. A lot of people aren't used to being home. They're home with their families. Some of them have their kids at home, and you got to create some routine, some norms about how you're going to operate. Until now, structure is a very powerful thing, and so whether you all decide, what, we're all going to get up at a certain time, we're going to have breakfast together, or I'm going to get on my phone early in the morning. The kids, there's going to be the non-device time. We're going to be off electronics for a certain part of the day. We're going to have dinner together. We're going to schedule exercise. We're going to schedule things. So once you put a routine in place, and ironically, I've seen some documentaries recently about some of the prisons around the world, and they talked about how the people who are able to survive these prisons and solitary confinement and everything have a very strict schedule because they're in a very high pressure situation. Now, I'm not going to say your home is like a jail cell, but you're not used to being limited this way. So I think routine is really important. I think your mindset is important. The big thing I've been focusing on, I personally, I've had a bunch of events canceled that I was going to be doing, that Valor and I were going to be doing. We were all set. We had people looking at our house. We had people looking at our house 3 times. We expected an offer in the next couple of weeks and moving out to Colorado. And at this point, we're like, oh, you know what? And everyone has their own benchmark of what they want to do. But at this point, we're, instead of focusing on what's not happening, we're focusing on what we do have. Our kids are safe. We're, quote unquote, stranded here in Orlando in our house. That's not really a really punishment. So I think you got to just back off from all the things that, we're creatures of habit, and we get used to having certain things, Wi-Fi, ready access to all the food we need to buy at the supermarket. There's just a lot of things we take for granted. And I think if we can put ourselves in a situation for ourselves that we're seeing all the positive things. Now, people who don't believe that will think that's a pretty naive statement. Hey, Dan, the whole world's falling apart right now, and you're talking about focusing on what you have. But there's been a lot of worse times than this. And, the good thing about a situation like this is once it's gone or once it's reduced and it's gone. This is not like terrorism where you don't know where the next thing's going to happen. And so this can be managed. It's something we can, a tangible thing that we can manage and put our hands on. I think when it comes to managing your teams, once again, communication is incredibly important. Planning, and talking about what the future is going to hold. Get people to start thinking about the future now. What will this look like? Let's come up with the worst case scenario. Then let's move to a mid case scenario. We'll move to the best case scenario. Challenge your teams every day and give them structure and say, okay, if we don't come out of this the next 2 weeks, how are we going to handle this? The next 3 weeks. Get your finance people to start running models and run numbers. What are the ongoing costs we have right now? What are the things we can cut back on? What are the contracts we can cancel at this point and put on delay? If we want to keep paying our people, we will pay them at 100%. At what point will we pay them at 75%? At what point will we pay them at 50%? And just run these models. You have plenty of time right now to be doing this planning. And what's going to happen is a lot of people are watching the news right now. They're focusing on what's going on, and it's just going to be the same news over and over again. And then when it comes time to get to launch and get back out there, then they're going to start doing that work. And there's no reason people should not have a plan when it's time to mobilize and start getting businesses up and running and get to some modicum of normalcy again. And then let me see. I think the other piece of that is just empathy. Let's get focused on what we need to be doing, but let's take a moment to talk to people. How are your kids? How's your family? What's going on? Make sure you have those humane moments with people, and just stay in that moment and keep things nice and cool, and connect with people. So those seem like some things I'd be thinking about.
How about on the side when we start thinking about customers? So we've got these people who are outside of our organization are probably dealing with a lot of the same stuff that we're dealing. We're not in our own echo chamber. What about those outside of our organization? How do you think of
Sure.
this?
Yeah. So once again, how do you, as I'm calling my special podcast, my Come Rain or Shine bonus podcasts are called Lemon to Lemonade, Lemons to Lemonade. So how do you create value out of this? And I think right now with your customers, this is the time to be checking in on them. This is the time to see how they're doing. This is the time to see if they need anything, and not just from a business perspective, whatever product or service that you're selling them, but are they doing okay? I think right now goodwill will be paid off very well. I talked to my cousin in France who owns a few companies there, and he got a note from his bank and said, "Hey, we're going to stop any payments on loans for 90 days." And he said it was incredible. And I don't know if the government put that out or the bank decided, but he said that was just one less thing for him to worry about, because they were proactive and they understood that. And obviously they're able to do that, and they wanted to move forward with that. I think right now companies that are, arguing about refunds on trips and kind of thing, that they're going to pay afterwards, because this is a very intense situation. It's an anomaly. It doesn't happen often. So I think connecting with your customers, not trying to sell right now, but just trying to help right now. And when we get back to some semblance of normalcy, there'll be an opportunity to sell again. Now, you may be selling something that's going to help them right now, and that may be a service you're going to provide. And then the other thing is, if you're in sales and you're used to going seeing people in person, well, you better figure out how to do that on the phone now. And I just got an email from someone who's in sales who I know, and He said he'd never done that, but he had his first call. He hadn't sold on the phone in years. He slowed down. He made a connection, and you have to learn some new approaches to get this stuff done and learn how to do it well. Because the other option is do nothing, and that's never a good strategy.
Dan, this has been awesome. I've got one more question. Where does reflection play a role in all of this? I mean, given the noise that we've got out there, and there were some themes that you were talking about related to listening to others. What about listening to self and going through some kind of reflective practice? Is that important at this time too?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I yesterday we're doing some meditation. We're not by any means professional meditators. I can clear my mind for about 3 seconds before something comes back in again. But we laid down on the floor and listened to and meditated. We have a good recording we use, and just thought about things. We're about to go take our dog on a 5-mile walk. And that's what we do every morning. We go out and walk the dog. We chat. We talk about what we're thinking about, what the news is. We're reflecting back on, hey, do you remember after 9/11? Do you remember in '08 when the stock market crashed and everyone said it was the end of the world? She was talking about her parents at the end of World War II were 10 years old and there was no food. So once again, I think this idea of I can think of 1,000 ways this could be worse. This could be Ebola and not something that has such a low death rate with it. This could be another 9/11 terrorist piece. So anyway, I think focus on the positives, reflect on this is going to be a blip. This is going to be a story for your kids and your grandkids. They're going to remember this point in time. But when we come out of it, there's going to be a ton of positives. The fact that technology is being used in different ways right now. We're going to figure out a way to manage this. This won't be the last pandemic that is going to come out, the last virus that's going to come out, but we are going to have a whole new plan on how to manage it, just like we did after 9/11 and security, and the world became more complicated. But everyone's going to have a plan next time around. This is their practice run, and it's going to be controlled even better next time, and even better the time after that. And that's kind of how the world works. So, like I said, I would just say keep looking at the positive, keep looking at what you can learn out of this. And, people are going to be strapped financially. But the good news is the whole world is dealing with the same thing. So governments and agencies are really going to step up. I think this is going to impact politics. It's going to impact a lot of things about how we think about people's lives and how they kind of live day to day.
So, Dan, as folks are out there thinking about different resources that they may want to read or look into or follow as it relates to leadership, are there any resources that you would suggest, whether it's books, blogs, podcasts, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there now. It's there's great stuff. I think if you get on and find a few podcasts of people talking about this, I love the idea that you can get a point of view from different people, from scientists, from business people. Just keep hearing different points of view on this, because right now I'm just looking at my iPad, and one comes out and says, China has seen a dramatic decline in the cases. And then, there's another. Time Magazine puts out something that most Americans aren't going to be able to get through this financially, which is terrifying. So I think you got to be careful, once again, about how much news you're watching, but stay up to speed on what's happening just locally. Whatever is happening across the world, there's nothing you can do about that. You may be curious, but I tell you, it's not going to help your health, and it's not going to help your stress level. And then the big thing I've been telling people is, reintroduce yourself to education. There's, the TED Talks. If you get the app or get to go to the website, there are so many fantastic TED Talks out there. And it's not just about coronavirus or pandemics. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about how to be happy in life. It's about how to leverage technology. I think generally just take this opportunity to learn more broadly about the world. And we'll get through this. We will get through all this. This is going to change the direction of a lot of people's lives. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's going to put them in a new direction they wouldn't have gone otherwise. And long term, this could be positive. But there's going to be, short term, there's going to be some hurting. People are going to be in a tough spot. And that's where I hope people's goodwill will come together and people will start helping each other out and looking after each other.
Awesome. We'll include links in the show notes to Dan's podcast, including the bonus episodes. Dan, thanks for joining me today and talking through this.
Absolutely. And everyone stay safe out there, and just make sure you're connected with people. You'll feel much better.
Awesome. And if anybody would like us to go a little bit deeper into these conversations, just let us know in the comments. Happy to do that. Happy to have Dan back on. He's been on before, and we can have a deeper conversation with a little bit more back and forth as we do this. Dan, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.